She whispered it like a kindness, soft and almost apologetic. Not tonight. I'm just tired. Her back was already turned before the last word landed. I nodded to the darkness, more out of habit than belief, and laid still beside her. We'd had nights like this before, quiet refusals wrapped in routine. It wasn't the rejection that stirred something in me. It was what came next. The glow of her phone pierced the dark like a subtle betrayal. A flicker of light against the wall. Then another. I watched her silhouette tense slightly, fingers moving just beneath the covers, screen tilted away from me. I pretended to roll over, let my breathing steady into feigned sleep. But my eyes stayed half-lidded, locked on the rhythm of that quiet tapping. A faint smile ghosted across her face. I hadn't seen that smile in days. My chest tightened, not from jealousy, but recognition. That smile used to be mine. She thought I was asleep, thought I was too used to her refusals to question them. She wasn't wrong, not completely. For months, I told myself we were just tired. Life was just busy. She'd come back around. But that night, something inside me stopped reaching for her. Not out of anger, but awareness. She was texting someone. Not answering emails. Not doom scrolling. Someone. And she was wide awake. I didn't speak. I didn't shift again. I gave her silence, not because I didn't care, but because I cared enough to listen before I acted. She didn't know it yet, but something changed in that flicker. Not in her, she was already gone. But in me. By morning, the glow would be gone. The smile would vanish. And the masks would return. But I had seen just enough to stop doubting my instincts, and I wasn't tired anymore. The next morning, she moved through the kitchen like any other day, sleep-tousled hair, hoodie loose over pajama shorts, coffee already brewing. She greeted me with a quick kiss on the cheek, barely more than routine. "You sleep okay?" she asked, without looking up from her mug. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Yeah, you." She hesitated half a beat. "Eventually." Then she sipped and turned away. It was a small lie, but I was starting to notice those now. She hadn't fallen asleep. I'd watched her scroll, smile, type, then turn the screen dark every time she adjusted her position. She'd stayed lit by that phone's glow for at least an hour after the whisper. The morning passed in the usual rhythm. She showered, took calls in her home office, laughed once, loudly, with someone on speaker, then quickly switched to earbuds when she saw me pass by. Her phone, once carelessly left on counters or nightstands, now followed her like a shadow. A password appeared on the lock screen where there hadn't been one before. She used to leave it wide open. That's what struck me the most. Not the sudden wall between us, but the quiet, methodical way she was building it. She was careful. Not just hiding something, guarding it. After lunch, she stepped out for a walk, claimed she needed to clear her head. I waited until I heard the gate click behind her before walking straight to the kitchen drawer where we kept the spare devices. I pulled out the tablet we barely used anymore, the one still linked to our shared data plan. Her messages were gone, cleared, notifications silenced, apps logged out. But I didn't need to see the messages. Not yet. All I needed was the timeline. And I remembered something. Our phone provider had a shared data usage log. Calls, messages, timestamps, contact numbers. Even if she wiped the surface clean, the trail ran deeper. And I was ready to follow it. Quietly, carefully. Because the worst part wasn't the possibility that she was hiding something. It was how easily she believed I'd never look. That night, once she fell asleep, phone face down beside her, screen dark and silent, I slipped out of bed and into the office. The house made its usual settling sounds, a faint groan from the pipes, the hum of the refrigerator, the subtle click of the HVAC. I moved with purpose, methodical and calm, like I'd done this before. I logged into our shared phone account. The dashboard loaded slowly, each second a small torment. Then the numbers populated. One contact stood out immediately. A number I didn't recognize, no name, no photo. But over the past 3 days, it accounted for nearly 700 messages. Nearly all of them from her line. Short bursts during the day. Long sessions between 10 at night and 1 in the morning. Right when I was next to her. Right when she was whispering, "I'm just tired." 700 messages. She hadn't just drifted. She'd relocated her attention entirely. She'd wiped her device clean, sure. But digital footprints aren't so easily erased. Her phone synced to our shared plan, and that meant I had access to the metadata, the raw number, the volume, the timing. It wasn't everything. Not yet, but it was enough to confirm what I'd seen in the dark. I copied the logs, screenshots, timestamped. I stored them on a flash drive, then deleted the session history from the browser. Covered every trace of my digging. Not because I was afraid, because I wanted time. I wanted clarity before confrontation, evidence before emotion. Back in the bedroom, I watched her sleep, peaceful, rested. Maybe she believed I'd never ask questions because I'd spent years being steady, quiet, predictable. Maybe she thought silence meant trust. It didn't. It meant calculation. She'd underestimated me, and I wasn't planning to wake her from that mistake. Not yet. The next evening, she made pasta. Fresh basil, roasted cherry tomatoes, even that wine she only opened when guests came over. No guests tonight. Just the two of us and a quiet pretense stretching between us like a taut wire. She was cheerful, deliberately so. Asked about my day with light in her eyes. Laughed at one of my dry replies. Reached across the table once to touch my hand, thumb brushing over my knuckles like we were still in sync. I played my part. Nodded when I should. Smiled in muted tones. Let her think I was still inside the bubble she'd built, the one where I stayed quiet, stayed trusting, stayed blind. But my mind was elsewhere. I was mapping timestamps. 700 messages don't hide well once you learn to read time like a calendar of intention. 8:14 a.m. every weekday, right after I left for work. Lunchtime spikes. Nighttime flurries. Always around the same windows. She used to call me during those breaks. Now, I was background noise. She refilled my glass and told a story from her office. Something light about a coworker's embarrassing ringtone. I watched her face as she spoke, catching how her smile lagged half a second behind her words. Practiced. Controlled. Like someone reenacting a version of herself. I miss this, she said at one point, catching my eye. Us. Just being normal again. I didn't answer right away. Just let my fork hover over the plate. Yeah, I said eventually, voice steady. Feels like a good evening. That was the moment I knew she was testing the mask too. Seeing how much I'd noticed. Measuring if my distance meant suspicion, or just emotional fatigue. She didn't realize I was watching more than her words. I was charting consistency, looking for fractures. There were small ones. A wrong detail in her timeline about when she took a walk. A slip when she mentioned a meeting she hadn't mentioned before. Tiny discrepancies, but they added up. And the more she smiled, the clearer it became. Normalcy was her strategy, but it was too late for that. I'd already seen behind the curtain. And now I was counting how often the mask slipped. She left for a yoga class around 6 the next morning. Claimed she wanted to clear her head before the day started. It was believable enough. She'd gone before. And still, the moment the front doors shut behind her, I moved. Her old tablet, forgotten in a drawer, had once been synced with her cloud account when we used to share calendars and playlists. Back then, merging everything felt like trust. Now it felt like opportunity. I turned it on. Updated the software. Downloaded a backup extraction tool I'd researched the night before. It took 20 minutes. Then it began syncing. Text threads populated slowly. So did her cloud drive, recent photos, notes, and even autosaved drafts of unsent messages. What had been wiped from her phone still existed in the backup chain. Fragments of conversations, cached images, memory traces. And then there it was. The number. No name. Just a thread of blue and gray bubbles. Dozens of them. Heart emojis. Lines like, "Last night was everything." And, "You always know what to say." And one photo, grainy, dimly lit, her smiling in a mirror, freshly showered, hair damp. I stared at the screen. Not in rage. In stillness. Because now I wasn't assuming. I wasn't guessing. I was reading it in her words. She wasn't just chatting. She wasn't confused. She was invested. The thread stretched back weeks. Their rhythm was well-worn. Private references, subtle codes, flirtations hidden just enough to avoid suspicion, unless you knew what you were looking at. But one line stopped me cold. She wrote, "He'll never leave. He's too quiet to act." I read it 3 times. She wasn't just hiding from me. She was betting on me, betting that I'd stay passive, predictable, conveniently oblivious. I closed the tablet, heart steady, mind sharper than ever. She thought I was asleep while she lived this second life. She thought silence was my weakness. She was wrong. Silence was my camouflage. By the end of the week, the rhythms were undeniable. I charted them like a man preparing for trial. not because I needed more proof, but because I needed to understand the pattern. Knowing when gave shape to why, and I wasn't interested in fragments. I wanted the full architecture of the betrayal. They spoke every morning between 8 and 8:30, right after I left for work, before she logged into her first meeting. He'd call sometimes. Other times, she sent photos, not explicit, but private. A coffee mug selfie. A close-up of a bracelet I'd given her years ago, now apparently their inside reference. It meant something to them. She'd repurposed it, rewritten its meaning. At lunch, more check-ins. Thinking about you, she'd write. Or, he doesn't notice anything. That line appeared more than once. But the heaviest part came at night. While I was 10 feet away, pretending to sleep, she'd lie in the dark typing messages like, "I wish I could fall asleep next to you," and, "He's so checked out lately, it's sad, really." No punctuation in that last one. Just clinical detachment. Like I was a failed character in a story she'd outgrown. She painted me as dull, passive, easily ignored. That was their shared illusion, me as harmless backdrop. But I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was awake. And the more they underestimated me, the clearer my next steps became. I began building a digital file. Organized folders, timestamps, message extracts, cross-referenced call logs. One tab for financial overlaps, one for potential exposure. It felt cold at first, mechanical. But that's how I knew I was on the right path, because it kept me from burning. I didn't want this to be a reaction. I wanted it to be precise. One message, saved from 3 nights ago, stayed with me longer than the others. She'd written, "He never says anything. I think silence is just how he disappears." She was half right. But not in the way she hoped. Because silence wasn't how I disappeared. It was how I prepared. I started pulling back, inch by inch. Not in a way she could label as distant or cold, nothing that obvious. I simply removed the little confirmations she once relied on. No more leaning in when she spoke. No reflexive smiles at her jokes. No warmth for the sake of comfort. I became quieter, but not vacant. Just unreadable. At first, she didn't notice. Habit makes even the most alert partners lazy. But after a few days, the shift registered. She watched me longer across the dinner table, asked more follow-up questions than usual, offered random compliments I hadn't heard in years. "You've been different lately," she said one evening as we brushed our teeth side by side. "Just quiet, I guess." I didn't meet her eyes in the mirror. "Just thinking lately." She paused, toothbrush in hand, studying my reflection. "About what?" I shrugged. "Everything, I guess." She wanted a firmer answer, but I didn't give it. Let her sit in the ambiguity. The same ambiguity she'd weaponized against me. And while she mulled over that silence, I was using it to move. I ordered a separate storage drive, compiled folders, names, dates, partial message captures with metadata attached. Every piece placed deliberately, not just for confrontation, but for legal use, if needed. I'd also started checking credit card charges more carefully. There it was, a hotel invoice billed to our joint account. Not an extravagant place, but private, discreet. And not a location she ever mentioned. That gave me a date. And the call log from that day showed they'd spoken just before and just after the check-in window. She hadn't just misled. She'd prepared. The next morning, she left a note on the kitchen counter with a smiley face drawn in the corner. "Made your favorite lunch, thought you could use a boost." I took it with me. Left it unopened on my office desk. Not out of bitterness, but to remind myself. She was performing closeness. I was dismantling illusions. One of us was still acting. The other had already left, quietly. I spent Saturday morning at a cafe across town, Wi-Fi solid, eyes low. My laptop open, not for work, not for leisure, but for precision. This was the part no one sees, the part no one ever talks about in whispered conversations or online threads. I wasn't looking to catch her anymore. I was building the foundation to leave cleanly, and take as much of my life with me as possible. I'd created a new cloud drive. Backed up everything. Call logs, message screenshots, payment receipts. The hotel charge I found last week lined up perfectly with a set of deleted messages I recovered from her synced cloud, ones she likely thought were gone. I had timestamps to the minute. Then I pulled our joint account history, quietly sorted every unexplained charge over the last 2 months. A rideshare receipt leading to a private apartment building. A charge at a wine bar we never visited together. A lunch bill during a day she told me she worked through. I cross-referenced each one. Every lie had a receipt. Every alibi had a seam. She wasn't just keeping secrets. She was financing them from the same account we used to buy groceries and pay the mortgage. I took screenshots of everything, each file titled with a neutral tag. I wasn't emotional here. I was documenting misrepresentations and shared resource misuse. And then I did what I'd been delaying. I called a lawyer. Not to burn everything down, but to protect what was still mine. I asked about asset separation, housing rights, digital evidence admissibility. I asked about how to quietly freeze joint accounts without raising alarm, and how to file in a way that minimized drama but maximized clarity. She texted me mid-consultation. "Hey, want tie tonight? I'll pick up on the way back." I stared at it for a long moment, then replied simply, "Sure. That sounds good." Let her think I was still playing house. Because in a way, I was. I just wasn't planning to live in it much longer. She leaned into the bedroom doorway that night with the same half-smile she used when she wanted something to feel normal again. Hair damp from a shower, oversized sweatshirt hanging loose, like the early years when comfort was easy and nothing needed explaining. "I'm not in the mood tonight," she whispered, voice soft. "Just a little off." I didn't look up from the book in my hands. I nodded once, kept my expression unreadable. "Of course," I said calmly, flipping a page I hadn't actually read. She stood there a beat longer than necessary, maybe expecting a reassuring smile, maybe testing if I'd protest, but I gave her nothing. Just silence, the same silence she'd once banked on to avoid questions. She eventually turned away, lights dimming as she crawled under the comforter, phone in hand. I waited 20 minutes, then rose quietly, book in hand, and walked down the hall to the guest room. Shut the door. Didn't slam it, didn't sigh, just shut it. She didn't call after me. Didn't text. Maybe she assumed I needed space. Maybe she assumed I'd return before dawn like always, but I didn't. At 4:45 the next morning, I was already dressed, bag packed. Not a suitcase, just a messenger bag with the essentials, documents, laptop, external drive. The quiet tools of a man who's not running, but exiting on his own terms. I left a copy of the hotel receipt on the kitchen table, one of the messages, and a photo. Hers, smiling in the mirror, time-stamped precisely during one of her whispered refusals. No note. No accusations. Just truth. I walked out the door into the gray hush of morning before the birds started. She once whispered that she was too tired for closeness. Now I'd answered in kind, with distance. She wouldn't see it coming, but she'd understand exactly what it meant. She called twice that afternoon before I answered. I let it ring until the third try, then finally picked up, voice steady. "Where are you?" she asked, breath catching. "You just left? What's going on?" I kept my tone calm. "There's a folder on the table. You'll find answers in there." Silence stretched between us. Then, a brittle edge crept into her voice. "What folder? What are you talking about?" "The receipts. The message threads. The hotel charges billed to our account. The message you sent at 11:43 p.m. last Thursday. You know the one." She didn't speak for a full 10 seconds. Then, "That's not what it looks like," I interrupted, softly but firmly. "Don't. Just read. Then you'll understand why I'm not standing in that kitchen pretending everything's fine." A sharp exhale. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I let that hang in the air, unacknowledged. "You said I was too quiet to act," I continued. "You were half right. I stayed silent long enough to be sure, but not to forgive it." Her voice dropped. "Can we talk? In person. Just talk." "I don't think we're at the talking stage anymore," I said, not cold, just clear. "We're at the accountability stage." She tried again, softer this time. "Please. You're making this so final." "It is." I hung up before she could start crying. I wasn't being cruel. I was being complete. That evening, her messages came one after another. Apologies. Explanations. Promises. Emotional pleas disguised as reflection. I read them all. Didn't respond. Because the confrontation had already happened. Not in a shouting match. Not in some public unraveling. Just a quiet, final truth laid bare on a table, where the only thing left was her own recognition of what she'd done, and what she'd lost. By Monday, the joint accounts were frozen. My name removed from anything I didn't need tied to hers. I'd moved funds, closed loops, rerouted everything essential. My lawyer had filed the initial papers, quietly, efficiently. She tried calling again. 12 times in one day. The voicemails shifted tones, pleading, apologizing, once even accusatory. That last one she regretted. I could hear it in the way she stumbled halfway through and hung up. Friends started reaching out too. Not many, just the ones we'd known as a couple. The kind who'd seen our anniversary posts and assumed we were solid. I didn't explain everything. Just said, "We're separating." I had my reasons. That was enough. But news travels fast in small circles. By the end of the week, someone told the other man's wife. I wasn't involved in that. I hadn't shared anything. But people talk. Screenshots circulate. And apparently, not everyone protects secrets the way I had. The late-night texts stopped. The glowing phone went dark. She still posted pictures of coffee mugs and soft blankets like nothing had shifted. But the tone changed. No tagged photos. No affectionate comments. Just curated silence. I imagined her waiting for his name to light up again. It didn't. Whatever fantasy they built collapsed the moment it was exposed to daylight. He didn't stand by her. He didn't reach out. He just vanished, taking the flattery, the messages, the illusion with him. Now, she was left with the one thing she once used as a weapon: silence. Except this time, it wasn't protection. It was consequence. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the quiet one in the story. She did. Weeks passed. The noise faded. The anger, the disbelief, the spinning excuses, all of it drained out like water from a cracked tub. I stayed where I was, an apartment with clean walls, uncluttered drawers, and a kind of quiet I could finally breathe in. Every few days, a new message came from her. Not just words, confessions dressed as reflection. I didn't realize what I was doing. You were always there. I just didn't see it. I thought you'd never leave. Each one longer than the last. Each one too late. She never said the words directly. She danced around them. Regret. Nostalgia. Hints of recognition that the man she'd underestimated had been watching, had been waiting, and then had walked without giving her the chaos she might have expected. One voicemail played in my headphones as I folded laundry. Her voice cracked halfway through. "I keep thinking about that night, when I said I was tired. I thought I had time to fix it. I thought you'd stay." I didn't press delete, but I didn't reply either. Because her mistake wasn't just the deception. It was believing silence meant absence of consequence. She used to whisper rejection into the dark. Subtle, habitual. Then she'd turn toward another glow, another attention. I used to lie beside her, listening, thinking I was being patient. Now I understood. She asked for space, for understanding, for quiet.